This is Back to Back.
Yo, what's up, back-to-backers? This is Willy Joy. Welcome to the show. This is Back to Back. This is my podcast. Happy to be here with you guys. This is a pretty special episode for me personally because this is the 50th episode of this show. Even just saying that sounds crazy to me. I can't believe we're already to 50. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's out there listening, everybody who's been on the show, all my guests. Anyone who's believed in this, it's insane to me that we're already at 50 episodes. We're not slowing down. We got a lot more cool shit coming up for you guys, but I just wanted to take that second and say thank you. And for the 50th episode, we had to do something pretty special. So my guest on the show today is What So Not. One of the most unique, interesting artists out there making dance music right now. His debut album, Not All the Beautiful Things, is out right now, and he's on tour for that album. I met up with him and actually got to see one of the dates of the tour. It's something really special. You shouldn't miss it if it's coming to your town. All the links to the new album, the tour dates, everything is going to be in the description of this podcast. Before we get into that, usually I take a little time to just do some business off the top, tell you guys about what's going on with the show. But today I want to do something a little different. I'm recording this the morning after finding out that Avicii had passed away. Obviously, it just couldn't be a more tragic story. Such a talented person, such a young person, somebody who, by all accounts, was a sweethearted person, a kind person. I've never met anyone who had anything bad to say about Avicii. And his impact on dance music, I don't think it can be overstated. After a while, after all his success, I think he was almost seen more like a meme than an actual artist. After putting out Levels, after putting out the Country album, all these controversial moves that really polarized a lot of people. And regardless of what you actually think of those songs and that music, it's pretty undeniable how talented he was, how ahead of the curve he was. A-Track made a really good point earlier today that he had this vision of what was coming with DJs turning into singer-songwriters and pop stars themselves. And he was very early on all of that. Maybe too early, and maybe that's why he got that perception, but I think that's also why he kind of achieved that legendary status. And look, at the time I'm recording this, no details have been released. We don't actually know what happened. It seems likely that it's in some way related to his very public struggles with addiction and depression. It's just got me thinking about the weird dichotomy that exists in the music business. I think from an outside perspective, it looks like it's just amazing. You're an artist, you're a rock star, you party for your living. What could be better, right? But with any excess in life, there's always going to be a price to pay. And I think the entertainment industry, the music world, all of that is one of the few spaces that really encourages risky behavior and almost rewards excess. If you're a person who already struggles with these kinds of issues, depression, anxiety, addiction, or if you're just a person who's going through a rough patch in life, if at the same time you're a working artist as well, that can be a really dangerous place to be. Because I think in the business, from a marketing perspective, it's easy to just sell a one-dimensional character. It's easy to sell a rock star. It's easy to sell the life of the party. It's easy to sell the troubled, dark artist. But there's so much more, so much subtlety that gets lost with those kind of portrayals. Honestly, one of my hopes in doing this show is that we can all kind of open up, stretch out, and really talk about what goes on in our lives as artists and what the experience is really like. It's just a sad day, man. Addiction is very real. Anxiety is very real, and it affects people indiscriminately. This could happen to anybody. But here in this music world, I do feel like we haven't done a good enough job of talking about it, getting it out there in the open, and really trying to look out for each other. If anyone out there is struggling with any of these issues, depression, anxiety, addiction, please talk to somebody about it. Talking about it is always the first step. You can reach out to me. backtobackpod@gmail.com is the email address. And if you have somebody in your life who you think might be struggling with these issues, take the time out of your day, make the call, send the awkward text, whatever it is. If something ever happens, you'd always wish you had reached out sooner. So that's it. That's all I want to say. Rest in peace to Avicii. We truly will miss you, and thank you for everything you gave to the dance music world. So getting into this conversation with What's So Not, we actually did talk a little bit about his sobriety in making this album and a lot of changes he's made in his life recently to operate better as an artist and as a human being in this world, to deal with the pressures of it. Some other pretty wild stuff that you're going to hear him talk about in just a minute. I found this conversation really fascinating. I had never met him before, but we had so many mutual connections. The flow of the conversation was really easy, extremely engaging. And one quick note about the sound, you will hear some background noise in a few places in the interview. We were recording in the basement of a venue that was setting up for a show at the time. It was really the only time we could link up. It doesn't really affect much of the sound. It's still perfectly clear, but if you hear something in the background, that's what it is. No big deal. So let's get into it. I think this is a really special conversation. His album, Not All the Beautiful Things, is out right now. He's on tour as well. You got to go check him out. I'm going to let him tell you all about it right now. This is me and What's So Not, back to back. Let's go.
What happened with rehearsal?
Yeah, what happened with rehearsal?
We had a 4-day rehearsal, of which I was able to rehearse for 30 minutes. So I ended up today, we just rented like a little garage kind of spot at some warehouses where they had a drum kit set up, and I just bashed away in there for about 3 hours, and Trev came in and we just did playback on all the songs in the set and ran through the guitar parts and the drum parts. And
nice, man.
I haven't played for 10 years.
Wait, so what are you actually playing in the show?
I'm playing an electric drum kit.
Okay.
Running the show. I'm working on doing a few more things, but we're sort of taking it one step at a time as we sort of build it all. There's a lot of moving parts. About to get onto ears for the first time, like in-ear monitors.
Right, yeah.
So there's just a lot of different mechanics and intricacies to everything, like even the sensitivity of the drums.
Right.
Like being triggered by a different drum or the vibration of the bass and having to work that out. And rebuilding drum kits for every single song that are EQ'd in a way that it sort of accentuate what exists already in the song.
And it's got to be tough because every little change you make affects every other piece of the show, right?
Totally. Even like the drum sounds in particular, it's sort of you spent years building a song and fine-tuning it, mastering it, getting it mixed and all of that. And then to just go and be like, oh, we're going to add some stuff over the top of that too. It's just sort of like, okay, well, you better do it very, very well.
Right, it's got to be tasteful.
And I haven't had to do that before. It's really interesting. You kind of add a tone of a drum that complements but also sits on top of. It sort of stands out. So like if you have a tight, trappy kind of snare, then you might add like a nice resonating with a little bit of a whole sort of verb in it so that it feels like it's a nice room snare.
Because sound selection is so key to production in general, right? And then when you're thinking about it in a live context, it's got to be really hard to avoid that just sort of like, I'm playing a drum kit over a song kind of vibe.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is the first time. We haven't really announced this at all as a live tour. It's kind of me performing a show that people might expect with all these sort of exciting new elements that we're literally road testing as we go about.
That's got to be fun though, man.
It's really exciting. The first few shows were excruciatingly nerve-wracking for me because I haven't played for about 10 years. And
Right.
just even the muscle memory is like kind of gone in my hands and like all the little paradiddles and whatever I used to be able to do sort of somewhat there, but it's like I go to do it and it just sounds wrong.
Right, no,
It's like
exactly.
my brain knows what to send, but the hands don't know how to keep up.
Yeah, I used to play the trumpet, and I remember now I try and go back, and it sounds like a 5-year-old is playing. You know, it's like it's just pointless because it's the muscle memory, and then you just feel bad about yourself because your brain remembers that you used to know how to do it. But this must be also probably the biggest headline tour you've done in the States, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I've never toured an album before. I've never created and released an album.
That's exciting too.
This is probably the most excited I've ever been for a tour. I've been looking forward and sort of building up to this for many, many years now, where I could create this huge body of work that I really believe in that has this whole cohesive sort of narrative to it, give it to people, have them sit with it for a month, and then go out and perform it in a unique way.
Right.
And sort of rebuild everything in an exciting fashion for the live show and rebuild a lot of my old songs and sort of fuse them with vocals and different parts from new songs and other people's records and like the Stranger Things themes and Kendrick tracks and stuff like that.
Right.
And sort of blend it all together in this exciting way. And now I've got Trev on the road with me for this whole tour. That's actually Trev Lukather, who's the son of Steve Lukather from Toto.
Oh, really?
He's on the whole tour
Oh,
with me.
man, I had no idea.
Yeah, we all met essentially through working on that song together because Trev did the guitar solo at the end and I was like, hey man, what are you doing these days? I know your dad's a little bit busy, but how do you feel about coming out on the road with me? And he was totally up for it and he's so great. He's such an incredible guitarist, really good dude as well. So
that's fantastic.
It's been a very, very fun and quick sort of inclusion to the crew.
Do you have like a relationship to the Toto family at this point?
I mean... not so much in a literal sense, but like Lukather is amazing. He's such a great dude. I've hung out with him quite a few times now, and his emails are just like nothing else. You should see. I remember when I sent them the final version of this song. He sent me 3 sequential emails within about 2 hours. The first one was sort of like, oh, cool, this is it. Okay. And he wasn't quite sure of it. And the second one was like, wait, we just showed it to our kids and they're jumping around the room and screaming. And then the third email was this like 3-page long, all capitals. This is brilliant. This is one of the greatest things I've ever been a part of. I get it. Oh my God, you did it. You put it all together. Because it was a bit of a Frankenstein job. We sort of did this one session and part of the song was in a different key that I ended up changing. And then just over many, many years of me coming back to it and revisiting it, finally all sort of came together in a fashion I was really happy with and everyone's happy with. So,
well, how did you even reach out to them to try to set up that recording in the first place?
It came about by, it's kind of funny. I was playing Africa, but many, many years ago.
Right. You and Skrillex both, right?
Yeah. So I started playing it and just soon after that, like I was playing in Australia and it was like a fun nostalgic moment that all the festivals I was doing in Australia at the time, I hadn't come to America yet. And I came to America and Skrillex had just signed us to Alza at that point. Of course, with Ninja Tune and Sweat It Out now. But he started playing it as well. And it was when he put out his second album, I think it was. And so he was, the headliner of a lot of the shows and festivals. And he was being amazing, sort of putting me back to back with him, sort of introducing me to America and bigging me up. And even I remember still he did like he was like one of the headliners on the Ultra live stream or something, and he played Africa and then shouted me out like on the live stream. This is very early days. All my friends in Australia, oh my God, he just said your name on the Ultra live stream.
Yeah, that's a big moment. Right?
It was really funny. And then, we got hit up by Rolling Stone because apparently the track got back into the US charts after like 3 decades or something of it not being in there. And they traced it back to the fact that me and Sonny were going around at all these big festivals in America playing this song, and then kids were going home and buying it and streaming it and looking into it.
That's so funny.
And now, of course, it's even turned into this meme thing. And me and Steve Lukather, we were just kind of laughing about it the other day, how crazy the world is, because he was telling me about how their group used to get quite a hard time, and like, he's written on like 1,000 people's albums.
Holy shit.
Written and performed on 1,000 people's albums. Him and Jeff like created Beat It for Michael Jackson and a bunch of other songs, and worked with Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, all these people.
Yeah, that's so insane.
But I think they used to get a bit of a hard time in the press, he was saying. Like they all the artists that were at the sort of the face of the song got the credit.
Right.
And he was like, hang on a minute, where the guys making all this, And now it's only now that like really they've had this kind of crazy resurgence and people are like, oh wait, they were actually at the center of all of these.
They were kind of the early version of ghostwriters almost.
Yeah. I mean, it was like that back in the day. There was the people at the front and then, there was all the people at the back, kind of like it is now.
Right.
But yeah, it's pretty cool. It's so lovely to see. He's just so happy right now, him and the band.
That's so cool, man. So cool that you can kind of facilitate that moment or just even be involved at all. That's such a crazy connection to me.
Yeah.
We're talking about these crazy shows now. Do you remember the first time you ever played in the States?
I do.
Where was that?
Well, it's a borderline answer because the first time I ever played was on Holy Ship, but technically that's international waters.
Off the coast, right?
But you do stop in the Bahamas, so it was. We'd either consider it that or we'd consider it I did a Webster Hall show when Webster Hall was still going.
R.I.P. Man.
So that was my first on land show in America.
That's a pretty good introduction, man. Legendary venue, New York City.
Oh, yeah.
What do you have any impressions of that night?
You know what? It sort of carries into the next night because the next night I played Vegas for the first time.
Ooh.
Okay. So I've rocked up to America. I've gone all the way from Sydney to New York, which is the worst time zone change you can possibly have. And I mean, I'm used to time zone changes now, but I wasn't then.
Yeah.
And I've gone to that. I've stayed up all night. Like, this is my first show. I was on tour with GTA and doing a bunch of my own headline stuff. We all celebrated until like 6, 7 in the morning. Like, yeah, this is fun. And then I was like, oh, I got to get on this flight to Vegas. Where's Vegas from here? So I get on this flight and then I realized like, oh, damn, this thing's like 5 or 6 hours away from here. Okay. So I get on the flight to Vegas, land in Vegas. And then I'm like, oh, damn, I got a 2-hour set tonight and I start at 3 a.m. That's actually like starting at 6 a.m. and going till 8 in the morning. Wow. I really didn't plan this very well. And I ended up sleeping through the start of my set. And I couldn't afford a tour manager at that time or anyone. And I remember the promoters rightfully were like so mad, calling my hotel room, and and that was when I decided to just totally stop drinking. Not that I was like drinking too much, but I was like, wow, I can't just like I've got such an opportunity over here in America, and there's all these really amazing things happening for me. I can't just be some guy that goes out all night and doesn't account for he's got to be, in a different time zone and just sleeps through his set, especially in somewhere like Vegas, because it's, they pay quite well there and they expect a really, really high level
standard,
performance.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. I barely drink anymore, especially for shows and all that kind of stuff. And it's the lifestyle, I think, at a certain point, especially as we get older too, like there's just not that much extra room that I have for stuff like alcohol. Like anything that's going to knock me down a peg, I can't really do it.
I feel you on that. It's sort of like, it's the type of thing, like even if you have just a few drinks, where I really notice it is creativity.
Right.
So you can function the next day.
Sure.
But you're not functioning at your optimal. And things that are very reliant on quite a precise frame of mind, they start to get very, very gray.
Right.
Like I can drive, bearing in mind my blood alcohol isn't too high. I can drive a car. I can go and get breakfast. I can do a bunch of emails and phone calls. But to sit at a desk with all my gear and my music and just have a brilliant idea come to me, now that may be something that's out of reach.
Right. Because it's all about maximizing time, right? And efficiency, especially when you're on the road. It's all good.
People not reading signs.
Well, it was good because I saw him open it and then read the sign.
We should keep this in. That was actually great. That was our lovely production manager, Richie. He just burst into our interview.
Shout out to Richie.
Shout out, Richie. Reading signs after opening doors. A radio's nightmare.
So before you came to the U.S., are you born in Sydney, born and raised?
I think I was. I mean,
you're not sure?
They tell me I was, but
okay.
you never really know where you're born because you can't remember.
That's an interesting point, actually. What if all of our parents, what if there's a global conspiracy to trick babies about where they're from?
Yeah, they're not even parents. They're just like the people that guide you through the early parts of life and tell you that you were from this thing. And
Man,
You know?
I'm learning a lot today. This is good.
I mean, I don't know if this is knowledge or just me suggesting some things that are probable, plausible.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Plausible?
Yeah.
Or,
Could be argued that it's plausible.
well, could it?
This is turning into a whole different podcast.
What do we really know?
Here's something you should hopefully know, which is what was growing up in Sydney like as a kid. Were you musical as a kid? You mentioned you had a drumming background.
Yeah. Growing up in Sydney was very relaxed.
Yeah.
It was like I grew up in like the worst part of a nice area.
Mm.
When you say that in Australia, that's very different to saying that in America.
Right.
So we had a thing like we had one of those unfortunate mass shooting incidences in Australia at some point in the late 90s, and then they literally just outlawed guns in Australia.
Right.
So being shot was never anything you worried about when you were growing up. I
course.
think there was one shooting in my whole like precinct area.
Right, and it worked. I mean, that's the thing.
In 18
right?
years, one shooting.
It's so wild.
But that's
man.
even like Singapore. I went there just recently, and they had a streak of 180 days or something with zero crime reported.
Jesus
like
Christ.
no, someone ran into my store and stole a lollipop. No,
That's
like
unbelievable.
nothing. It's crazy.
Unbelievable, man. I mean, I hear that kind of shit, and then I think about the climate we're living in the U.S. now, and it's weird times, man. Especially like going out and playing shows with big crowds of people. I was just talking to someone the other day, and they're like, "Yeah, it's I was thinking, do I need to hire security now? All that kind of stuff."
We were actually just on the Lollapalooza tour in South America, and this conversation, gun regulation and stuff came up. And it was really interesting because Chance was in the room and he started talking about it, and he had a very, very different perspective of it. And I was sort of just posing the question like, hey, I'm not American, I'm Australian. This is how it happened in our country, and this is what happened afterwards. And then he kind of explained it from his point of view. And he was saying like, in Chicago, if you didn't have something to protect yourself, you don't only have to be afraid of other people, you need to be afraid of the law coming in and planting something on you, or just pulling a gun on you saying you had a gun.
And Killer Mike was saying the same thing. And it's I hear them, man. I mean, it's tough with the history of this country.
Yeah.
It's definitely a thorny issue, but I feel like moving towards getting rid of it in some way, that can't be a bad thing,
Yeah. It was really tough to hear his perspective because I was honestly just like, I have no comprehension of that.
Right.
That's not something like, I mean, in Australia, cops aren't, how would I put this? They're not selective in who they're assholes to. They're kind of assholes to everyone.
Right.
They're just like very, very strict to everyone.
Yeah.
And potentially a little harsher and stricter on other groups, but they're just like, they're giving out tickets. They're just putting us in jail, giving us criminal records like it's nothing.
I definitely got yelled at a few times the last time I was out there.
Yeah.
Kind of unnecessarily.
Yeah.
Of course, I would say that.
But yeah, growing up in Australia, pretty crazy, man. I lived near a beach. I love the ocean. I'm so glad that was part of my upbringing.
What did your parents do?
They were both accountants. I went to a really average public school that was pretty crappy, but nice kids there, nice people. Really good mix of different ethnicities, which I think was like a nice way to grow up. It kind of was like, hey, this is the real world, like that was the kind of school I went to. It wasn't like private and everyone privileged and being given all these extra information on how to pass all these tests much better than the other kids.
Right.
It was like, it's like a struggle.
Yeah, no, of course, man. I mean, full disclosures, that is kind of what I had growing up, was like a nice private school with mostly white kids. And it really wasn't until I got out into the music world that I started meeting all these people from different walks of life and going to different places. And for me, that's like half the benefit of music for me, was like personal development that way. I had a great childhood, but I just wasn't exposed to that many different cultures, or even economic situations.
It's unfortunate because it's not something you choose often. It's just where you grew up and what your circumstances were. I was quite glad. I mean, the area that I lived was pretty nice in comparison to some of the places I've seen at this point in my life. But I love that there was, you know, a decent amount of diversity. Like I grew up, my closest friends were Filipino, Samoan, Indonesian, and you know, Greek, Italian. It was just like everyone.
And what kind of music exposure did you have at an early age? Was there music around the house?
It was mainly rock music. My dad was very much into Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. Mum was into Phil Collins and you know, the B-52s, and so I grew up with just a lot of that. I grew up with my dad. I was like, we're not listening to any of that shit. You know, like we're not putting it on the commercial stations. We're listening to rock music,
right?
And, you know, I'm kind of glad he did that to some degree because, but it was funny because I was playing in these like, I was in like the school band and then I was
playing drums.
And then I was also, so that was cool because that taught me about like drum lines and stuff like that and sort of being part of a bigger conglomerate of people. But then also I ended up in this band with a couple of close friends and that was really cool. That was so great for learning how to work with different personalities and how to sort of put songs together and write music and create a feel and a mood and a vibe and taught me about rhythms and progression and growth. And we were sort of a really poor version, I guess, of At the Drive-In and Rage Against the Machine and Silverchair. And
what kind of American culture was getting to you over there at the time when you were a kid?
Almost nothing. Almost nothing at all. One of my friends that I grew up with was really into hip-hop and rap music, but most of the stuff that was getting over to Australia was just the single of a certain artist.
Right.
And sometimes an album, but mainly just the singles that were sort of popping off on commercial stations.
Yeah, the MTV stuff.
Yeah, and it's crazy. I come over here. In particular, I remember this one show. It was me, RL, and Diplo did a back-to-back after a Mad Decent Block Party in San Francisco. And Wes was just playing all these rap records, and I literally never heard a single one of them ever in my entire life. I didn't know any of the names of the artists that they belonged to. And there was 2,000 people in this room in San Francisco singing every single word.
Right.
And I was like, wow, I've really grown up just totally shut out of this entire culture and community that has existed over here in America.
Man, and that's so interesting that you've kind of ended up doing something that I think could be argued as sort of hip-hop adjacent or hip-hop influenced in some way.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's because I got excited by it because I kind of took the attitude of rock and punk rock and then applied it to something that I heard that excited me because it was unfamiliar. And also for many years now, a friend I made quite early, his name's James Earl, who was actually one of the collaborators on the album, on Demons was the song. I randomly Airbnb'd his house one day when I was coming through Los Angeles, and we ended up becoming quite good friends and found out he was a musician, and we started working on some songs together. And he and his buddies, born and raised LA, worked on the Kendrick Mad City record, some Schoolboy stuff. He shot like Ty Dolla $ign's first music video that got him signed.
Nice.
So just, you know, jack of all trades, crew of people, all amazing musicians and producers. And I think he's had quite a strong impact on my somewhat understanding of American hip-hop and rap culture and the roots.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, that could probably be just as much of a strength as anything else because I was listening to the album again on the way over here and I really love it. And it just, there's something about it that's just a little different than a lot of, I think, your contemporaries. And hearing you talk about it, maybe it is sort of that, you know, coming to certain parts of the culture at different times than a lot of your peers. It felt a little more global to me.
I think a lot of it is sort of, I mean, I've traveled around the world for 6 years now, and every time I get into a country, I just find out what's going on there and hang out with the people that live there and really try and sort of dive into what they're experiencing, what's going on, what's popping off, what's exciting for them, what are they interested in. And that has such a huge influence on writing. Even stories they tell me will just inspire an entire song or taking me out to some techno club in Berlin that I've never been to before and hearing music and being like, wow, this is so different, interesting. Seeing a band that I would have never come across somewhere in Europe or talking to some kids in Asia about what they find interesting about music in the current climate.
Yeah. Do you always make an effort? I always try to when I'm touring to really, you know, actually get out and see something. Because, you know, it's so easy to go on tour and just see hotels.
Yeah, it is very easy to do that, especially if you've got a lot of time restraints and weight weighing down on you for responsibility. I've been very lucky that I've got my career to a point now that I have people in my circle that I trust, managers, agents, things like that, that I can just know they're handling things, and I can go and live life, and then of course write about it. And then, not to say that I don't work like a maniac, as I'm sure Alex over here would know. I just brought him to South America when we went to Lollapalooza, and it would be the case of finishing the show, getting back to the hotel at 2 a.m., bumping into it was the Anderson Paak crew at that time, bumping into them, hanging out at the bar with them, talking to the tour manager, realizing that they had a minibus, and then negotiating a deal to purchase it off them for the morning so that we could, in 3 hours' time, have a driver and an escort take us 2.5 hours to the beach. We woke up on the bus at the beach before sunrise. Giant, 3.5 meter Arctic swell coming straight in on this beach, no one in the water. And I was like, oh, well, I've made us all come down here, so I better get out there. And Ronnie, my tour manager, just freaking out about what Paddy would be thinking, who's my manager.
Oh, God.
As I paddle up this 2-story plus face of a wave in this open ocean, heavy shore break.
Well, hey, man, you got to get back to the water, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I get out there and I live life. And I think that is one of the most important things to my creativity is living like that.
Yeah. You can always sleep later, right?
Yeah. I've actually got myself into this routine of very comfortably only needing 4 hours sleep a night. So I have 4 hours sleep a night, and I have just a couple of naps or meditations in the day that are sort of under 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And I actually feel like I have more energy.
That's so interesting.
I also only eat once a day.
Really?
Yeah. So I ate Roscoe's last night, and I'm still full, and we're now at 5 p.m.
Yeah, that's great. You're the second person I've ever met. I have a good friend who does the eat once a day thing and swears by it.
Yeah, it's man. I think we've been trained into this way of consuming that is literally so that we consume more, and so that we need to earn more, and so that we spend more. I don't think it's actually how our bodies should. Like, if you think if you're a hunter and you're out in the wild, you're not even eating every day most of the time. You may be snacking on some berries and some nuts that you find, and then you're only catching something like once every couple of days.
For sure. I mean, if you look at, I've got a cat, and the cat, you put the food out and it's just there all day, but it's sort of the instinctual thing for a cat doesn't really gel with the food just always being there. So, he starts doing weird stuff. Like, he'll take the food out of the bowl and drop it somewhere else and kind of bury it over there, because he just doesn't, there's something about that animal instinct that just can't understand that it would always be there.
Maybe he's trying to hide it for later in a place that's a little more sterile.
It could be. I read something that it was, he felt like he was exposed, like if the food is just always there, that other predators might know that the food is there. And so he has to kind of take it off to a secret place. But who knows, man? I mean, for me, I'll just eat out of boredom too. And so it's interesting to think about. Maybe that's just how I've been conditioned. Yeah,
I think it is. And I when I worked on this album, I put myself through quite a torturous process of...
How so?
I have this finite amount of time, which was still a year. I had about a year to do this album, but I consider that finite in the grand scheme of things to create, such a large body of work whilst still touring. So I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? One, I pulled back everything I was eating to about 10 things, like what I could count on my hand. And it was steak, salmon, yogurt, pecans, cucumber, tomato, lemon, and Greek yogurt, and then coffee, if you want to count coffee.
Sure, yeah.
And that was it. And that was all I would eat every single day. When I toured and it was a little more difficult, I'd try and order a steak or just some steamed vegetables or something.
Yeah.
And then I started adding things in. I'd add pasta for a few days and I'd see how I'd react. And I slept for 3 hours longer and I woke up feeling tired and hungry. And I would do that with all these different things until I found, okay, cool, this is how my body likes to operate.
That's
operating
interesting.
Extremely efficiently. And then I did the same thing with sleep. I tried different ways of sleeping. I tried different types of meditation and napping, different types of exercises. And then I was like, okay, cool. So I need to do some sort of cardio every morning.
Right.
just to get my heart going, and then do yoga or just some basic stretching or something every few days to keep everything limber. And other things like only working on a song for 40 minutes and then having a 5-minute mental break of some sort, whether that's getting a glass of water, going to the bathroom, standing out in the sun just for a second and just sitting there peacefully, and then coming back in, working on something else for 40 minutes, working on something else for 40 minutes. And once I got through about 5 or 6 songs, I'd then maybe start back on the first one and I'd have all these new ideas from having cycled in and out and not got caught in loops and habits.
Which is so easy to happen.
And I became excited by something that I heard in the other song. I was like, oh, that might work in here, or something counter to that sort of melody or that type of sound might work in here as well. So it's just a constant way of keeping the mind and creativity quite fresh. And the thing I found with the eating part was not only do you save a lot of money if you're eating less meals, you save so much time.
True.
Because we're conditioned to think we need 3 meals a day, so that's okay. Let's go get breakfast in the morning. That might be an hour. I want to get lunch. I'm going to go get an Uber. I'm going to go somewhere. I'm going to catch up with a friend. I'm going to talk for a while. I'm going to sit there for a while. That might be another hour and a half, 2 hours. Go get dinner. Even if you cook it yourself, it might be a while. And there you go. You've probably lost anywhere from 4 to 6 hours of your day, which is
significant.
It's a huge portion of the day. So I worked out a way that I could cook something very quickly that was tasty. It was just eggs, sliced up some cucumber, sliced up some tomato, and put some lemon and pepper on it all. Cooked that in about 15 minutes. That's all I'd eat.
Man, that's very, that whole process sounds very monastic.
Yeah.
It's like, was it lonely at all? Like, was it just you?
It was extremely lonely. I allowed myself one social activity every 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
And the only reward I gave myself was if the surf was good down at the Wedge in Orange County. If it was good, I would get an Uber at 4 a.m. From Silver Lake down to Orange County, and I would surf for about 3 or 4 hours and then come back as soon as peak hour had died and be back in the studio by 11 a.m.
Man, was this an enjoyable process?
In
some way?
A very weird way. I was kind of excited by, I was like, how hard and how far can I push myself? And I learned how hard I could push myself, like when was pushing in an exciting way and when was pushing in an exhausting way.
Right.
Yeah, I was kind of like, what is the least amount of things that I can put in myself to find that it still functions and still gets the nutrition it needs? Because it's almost not like trying a bunch of things to add. It's about taking everything away to the point that you have only what you need.
And is this something you think you're going to continue from this point now that you've found it?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's
working.
I'm just running at this optimal level, and I'm awake 20 hours or probably 19 and a half hours a day. I'm only taking maybe half an hour, 40 minutes out of my day in entirety for food.
Wow.
And then everything else is just ideas, creativity, work.
It's pretty amazing, man.
Artwork, music, stage design, lighting.
Yeah.
Talking to my team about how we can do things better, more efficiently.
That makes a lot of sense, man, because I think when you have these moments when, your project is doing so well, you're kind of firing on all cylinders, that's absolutely the best time to go as hard as you can. And I think it's something I talk about on this show a lot, is kind of when you see those doors open up or when you see that window of opportunity, the importance of really just going all the way 100% as much as you can. I feel like, isn't there some famous inventor who lived that way, the 4 hours sleep? And
I don't know. I've heard it's a thing because it was actually Alex who's right here. He was telling me about it because he's, who was it, your friend who you work with? He was telling me he's on this 4 hour sleep thing. Right. I was like, oh, I think I do that. But like by accident.
Right.
Biphasic.
There we go.
Sleep cycle. Yeah, I kind of just started doing it by accident.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I found when I would eat more meals, I'd need more sleep.
And I'd sense.
Feel tireder because I think digestion is such a thing.
Right, yeah. Digestion is your body expending energy, right?
And weirdly, if I would feel tired, I would go running or do something cardio-wise and I would no longer feel tired. I wouldn't be exhausted from expelling energy and running. I would actually be exhilarated. Really strange.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, even just the tour lifestyle, I think, teaches you a lot about what your body can take and how much you're capable of.
Oh yeah, it's brutal.
It is,
It's
but
so
then
brutal.
somehow your body adapts, right?
It does, yeah.
Like I always, for me, anytime I come off tour, I get sick. Like
Interesting.
almost every time, if it's been like a long tour, I can always hold it together the whole tour, and then I get home and my body's like, okay, my turn.
I mean, to be fair as well, and to explain further, when I finish a big tour, I will then sleep for like 14 hours.
Of course. To bring it back to kind of the earlier days when I assume you were sleeping quote unquote normal amount. So you're in these bands as a kid and moving into, college age, that sort of thing. What did you think you were going to be doing at that point? Was music already something were you DJing already? Were you making music already?
So I started going clubbing when I was like 17. For the first time in my life, I was like, oh, dance music isn't lame. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I got really into it. I was like, oh, this is kind of tight. Like, I get it. Like, and we were going to the scene in Australia in that time was insane, man.
I've heard that.
Crazy. Like, we had everything. We had a lot of influence from Germany. There was very, very, very good minimal techno, tech house clubs. We had our own thing going on with these guys called the Bang Gang DJs who were just playing the most insane stuff.
They were the kings, man. The Bloghouse era.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
They were throwing like Be More, Baltimore, Ballet Funk remixes of all these insane Australian bands like Cut Copy and Vanshee, the Presets, Midnight Juggernauts, and then the whole sort of modular scene of the Klaxons, and then the Ed Banger scene like Justice and Sebastian, and all of this stuff was just like, it was just heaving, man. And dance music was a subculture, and commercial music was kind of this, I don't know, just kind of this corny like Australian commercial music that only existed in Australia. So then we just had our own little thing going on that no one was coming in and oversaturating and trying to milk for money. And it was just, you just go to these insane festivals with like 30,000 people, and it was like an underground 30,000 people thing, we had this incredible festival called Big Day Out, which would, it'd have like The Prodigy and Dizzy Rascal, then Kanye's on the main stage.
I
and
remember seeing
Bjork's
those
playing.
lineups, yeah.
They were just wild because, like, it's hard it's hard to get people over to Australia, so you got to do something big. So this was just this giant festival, like 120,000 people, I think they used to get in some of the cities.
And did you start DJing around that time?
Yeah, so I actually saw Justice play at Big Day Out, and I'm like, this is bad. I jumped the fence, but don't do that, kids. It's actually, I got in a lot of trouble eventually from doing that.
You're not the only one, my friend.
Yeah, don't do that. Just get the ticket, or like just get into the industry so you can get a free ticket.
Yeah, there you go. That's why we're all here.
The fence jumping runs out very quick and you get into shit. I saw Justice play, and I was still just a rock kid at that point, but I saw this group and I was like, what is this sound they are making? And it's very rocky. It's very like,
oh yeah,
4 to the floor, kick and snare.
Especially the early stuff, man.
The early stuff, like I remember this like Mr. Oizo remixes they used to do, and Waters of Nazareth.
Oh man, yeah.
Like it was just this wild, wild noise, and it was everything I loved about rock music, but then done in a way that just was uncomprehendable to me. So I went straight home and I checked them out on YouTube, and there was this 10-minute clip they'd done from the year before, 2006. And it was this 10-minute video of them playing at I Love Techno. And man, I've seen that a few times in the years gone by since, and I still watch it like this. It's just something else. It's so, so cool. And that was pretty much it. I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to do this DJ thing. And just after that, my friend that I just made from like sort of just going out and partying and whatever, he one day he goes to me, oh, dude, I got you a gig at this little club, which was this place called Candy's Apartment in the back room. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't know how to DJ though. And he's like, well, the gig's in 3 weeks, so you better learn. And
Amazing.
that was how I actually started.
Funny side note is that I was touring in Australia about a year and a half ago, and on an off day, I ended up at Candy's apartment while you were playing.
No way. You were at the reunion?
I was at the reunion.
How insane was that?
It was one of the craziest nights I've seen in a very long time.
Oh, man.
The vibe there was just unbelievable.
I literally had my CD wallet from 10 years prior. like CDs I got out and I was like, oh, I must have spilled a drink on that 10 years ago because it is just rotten and it will not play.
Amazing.
But I was literally playing the CDs that I had.
Yeah, playing off the CDs. That's amazing,
Yeah.
man. I don't even know if I'd remember how to do that anymore.
Do you know what's crazy?
What's that?
I still knew every single song by the first kick drum.
Really?
Yeah. Like, I was like, oh yeah, that's Reward is Cheese, Dead Mouse. Oh yeah, that's Positive, Mr. Oizo. Oh yeah,
man.
like, but the first kick drum, just because that's what it was back then. There was no screen to show you what was going to happen. I think it didn't even have like titles at the start. So
definitely not.
It just said
like
track one.
Yeah, if it was a
track
burned
two.
CDR.
And it was just like, yeah, and I was like, oh wow, I have this insane amount of knowledge that is just totally pointless in the world. You know, like I know all 6,000 of the biggest blog songs from this particular era that probably don't exist online anywhere anymore. But I don't know what use that is anywhere.
I mean, the people at that club were pretty happy about it, man. I think it's worth it for that moment.
I can't believe you're there. That's so cool.
Oh my God, dude. It was amazing.
That can't be repeated either. Like it was just, and you know the best thing is, I had brought James Earl, who I was mentioning before, him and all his friends out to Australia because he like kind of lets me live at his house and then use his studio to write my album. And I was like, hey, I want to fly all you guys out to Australia and like show you, you know, what it's like over there.
Right.
And he was there and he'd never heard. It was like me in San Francisco with Wes and RL, and he was there. He's like, dude, I'd never heard any of those songs, and I was so excited. Like, what were all those sounds?
That's amazing.
What was it? It was so cool.
You gave him a time warp, man.
Yeah,
That's
dude.
so wild.
And it's crazy to think that era was so like illegal. Like it was just everyone going and doing stupid stuff.
Yes.
With all these songs that shouldn't have existed, and now just get taken down immediately.
Right.
And like it was all this bootlegged everything and like 128 rips of whatever, and then someone is an engineer and knows how to like. Put a new drum kit on it and make some bassy drop to it.
I remember there were all these kind of hacky techniques. Like I remember Benzie showed me like shout out to Benzie.
Go Benzie.
Who showed me back in the day how to download any song from MySpace.
Yeah.
Like, you know, anything that was streaming on MySpace, he figured out how you could get like whatever, the 96 kilobyte version that they were actually hosting.
Remember 96 kilobytes in the club?
I do.
Yeah. I think my CDs I was playing that night were 96K, like max.
But that was kind of part of it, right? Like we were talking about Justice's early sound. It wasn't a clean sound, you know? There was all that grit and grime. So that's maybe something I kind of wish we had more of now.
You know, I got a little secret about low bitrate.
What's that?
Is that I used to purposely play certain big songs, popular songs, low bitrate, because people would just be excited by the song. They didn't care what quality it was.
Yeah.
And then you play something cool right after that's a WAV. And then suddenly they are just flipping out to this really, really strange and interesting song because suddenly the sound is so much clearer and so much tighter and so much more punchy.
A way you can sell it to them, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. So you play them like the really crummy version of something that's just going to generally excite them, and then you play them something that actually sounds super tight straight after.
Right.
And I used to do that in my sets so bad that I used to play everybody else's songs really low quality, and then I'd play all my own songs as WAVs, and then everyone would be like, "Oh, your song just sounds so good." I'm like, "Yeah, there's a reason for that. It's not because I'm a good producer. It's because I'm playing a totally different quality."
That's just smart business, man. I'm down with that. So, I mean, we're talking about the reunion, but maybe talk a little bit about the actual scene, you know, in 06, 07, 08, because you guys, it sounded like, had such an interesting little collective of people, many of whom who have gone on to be luminaries in whatever the scene is now.
Yeah. The funny story is always that Alice in Wonderland was our door girl.
Fantastic.
Hayden James as well, of course. There was so many of us in there. And it was just a time like...
Were you just DJing every night pretty
we
much?
We all just sort of got there at the same time at a similar level. And someone, I think it was Garth, who's still Alison's manager and an absolute legend, good friend of mine. He sort of was like, hey, we've got all these little crews of these people from these different areas of Sydney. They're all doing their own cool little thing. Let's put them together every Friday night and just make it a party. And the rule was you had to get there by 9 a.m. And if you left before 5 a.m., you were sort of shunned the next week. It was like, oh, dude, you didn't stay out all night.
Yeah.
And everyone would rock up 9 p.m. at night. We'd all have like somewhat set times, but kind of just be going back to back from 9 until 6 in the morning.
Sounds so fun.
Every Friday night. We'd like create all these stage designs, bring in artwork from everyone who was in college doing art and sort of hang it around. I had like some lasers and stuff. We made like a giant banner out of foam with like neon paint. We'd wear animal costumes. It was just a wild time, man. And the craziest thing was how on the pulse everyone that was coming to that party was with music. So if something had hit in the Hypem chart that week, you could bet every single person in that audience was waiting to hear that song. You know, they just knew. They were so on it.
Yeah, that's interesting now, you know, these days because electronic music has blown up so much and it's just a different culture. You can't expect that same level of knowledge and fandom, you know?
It was a smaller community, so there was lots of really cool stuff happening and it was easy to keep track of almost all of it.
Were you starting to produce music at that time as well?
I started, actually Hayden James brought me around about that time, like 2007, brought me in my first studio, told me, best thing you can do when you start producing is steal a Crooker's kick drum because they are the fattest and the meatiest. Steal one of those. And then you build, because it was all house music back then, it was all 128. Take one of those and then you just try and write a riff and try and write a breakdown and sample some chords or a vocal from somewhere. And I was like, okay, cool. So it sort of started like that with bootlegs. And then I started really getting into the idea of mashups. But like I would kind of take what I thought was the best parts of like 8 different songs and then create a song with that.
There was one you made that I played for probably over a year, like every set, which was the Sir Mix-a-Lot Big Chocolate mashup.
Yes.
I forget what you called it, but yeah.
I think it was Baby Got Milk.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, legendary mashup.
I made that in a green room like 30 minutes before I went on stage at this New Year's festival. That was a quick one. That was just like...
And I played it every show I did for a year.
That's
probably.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But that was so fun. Like, and I love that I started as a DJ because that helped me understand what certain sounds, what certain rhythms, what they do to people in a room. So it wasn't coming from, I'm going to write something. It was coming from, how do I make people react in a certain way? From doing things like I'd take like that guitar riff from Prodigy's Breathe and then add like a sample of an a cappella and then build it up into like a Justin Martin track or something like that. Like doing stuff like that was very exciting for me. And I was like, okay, I'm starting to understand what are the best components of all these different songs and all these different sounds. And then from there, all I just had to do was start making it myself. And then I went about learning how to do that for many, many years.
Right.
Until this point here.
Right, yeah. And I'm sure you've talked about this 8 million times, but very briefly, how did you meet Harley, a.k.a. Flume, who was part of what used to be the duo?
Yeah, it was pretty simple. There's not many people doing music at that time around, in Sydney, at least electronic sort of based laptop kind of style bedroom stuff. And he just lived in my local area. And he saw me playing at this club, Chinese Laundry in Australia. And he hit me up on MySpace actually. And he was like, oh, hey dude, I've been really uninspired lately. I saw your set and you're playing all this stuff I'd never heard before. I was really interested by it. I was wondering if you wanted to like work on some music. And I was like, yeah, cool. Because I've been doing all these bootlegs and like starting, I think I'd made like one original.
Sure.
And I was like, yeah, cool. So we got together and we started this thing, What's or Not. And I was sort of steering the ideas and he was more the hands at the start. And that of course changed, know, very much so over the next few years. I sort of helped him conceptualize and create the Flume project and was sort of behind the scenes with him on that for many years. And then we worked on What's or Not together. And yeah, it was kind of all just like that for about 2010, 2012. We were sort of working together probably 2 to 4 days a week, every week, and just jamming on ideas, sharing cool things we found from around the world and sort of excited us.
And how did it evolve for you? Sort of how did the project become, this global touring thing? Was it Skrillex who kind of gave you the first big shot?
I was talking to someone about this yesterday, and it was a combination of a lot of things.
Right.
But Danny Bell and Gary Richards had me on one of their stages in Australia. They were launching hard in Australia. And I was like a local as What's or Not playing on their stage.
Right. And you would always play by yourself, right? For the most part?
Yeah, there was we did like one tour together.
Yeah.
And then it was just always me from then on.
Right.
So they were really excited by it. And so it was interesting. I would play Africa and they're like, oh, I love that you played Africa, which is so funny now. And they were going to put you on the boat. So this is when Holy Shit was very new and like the hottest sort of new thing.
Right.
And they moved everyone's set times, made them 5 minutes shorter, and then squeezed me in like right at the start of the night, the second night. Gave me a half-hour slot. I don't know. There's a bit of talk around at that time. Had like Jaguar had just come out, Touched was out, the first EP was out, of course.
Right.
And ended up that show, it was like Diplo and Boys Noise was such a big deal for me at the time. Diplo and Boys Noise are there like rapping over the songs. Skrillex is on stage just yelling out things, like getting everyone hyped and excited.
Yeah.
Tiesto's over in the corner watching. What happened was so many people were side of stage to come and see what the What's Not project was, because it was the first time it was ever sort of overseas. That the stage manager was like, look, you can't all be backstage, so we're going to move you all on stage. And it was just one of those, Glen Jam has this video, if ever anyone wants to check it out. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like probably Holy Shit 2014 or something.
Yeah, up on YouTube.
And it's just like 35 people all on stage just raging. It was the first show I ever did. So that really, I think that
what a way to start,
that tick of approval from all those amazing artists sort of just coming and supporting it and being interested by it. I think that helped a lot. I think Sonny helped a lot for sure. He was bigging it up for and still does, you know. He's an amazing dude. One
of the nicest guys in dance music.
Yeah.
So just continuing onwards, you know, at a certain point, the duo became your solo project. That was like 2016?
Yeah, so a few months into 2016 was when I was able to sort of just start doing everything as I wanted to and start releasing records again and start, building giant peacock horse monster trucks and show visuals and things like that.
How did you experience it in those first few months? Like, did you have a lot of people, you know, sort of telling you what you should do next? Did you have a plan in place? How did you experience it?
I mean, at that point in 2016, I had everything in my head of what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it. It's just a matter of being able to do it.
Right.
You know? And then once I was able to do it, it was just like, go. Just go.
So for you, it was basically the gate just opened up and...
Yeah.
Well, that's good, man. That's probably how it should be.
Yeah,
I think that's the best way a breakup can happen.
Yeah, no, it was great. Like I just started doing everything that I thought would be a good idea.
Didn't have to clear it with anyone else.
And I had new management, which was so helpful. Teamwork, they've been amazing for me. And a lot of the agents that have been there since day one. Alistair Green, shout out.
Yeah.
Calendar, John Jung. My UK agent retired. I was so bummed about that. I really liked him. Kane, but we've got Paul now. Paul's killing it.
Oh, I know Paul, yeah.
You know Paul?
Shout out to Paul, yeah.
Shout out Paul.
He's a great
Paul's
guy.
amazing.
Yeah, I love that guy. So the EP you put out, Divide and Conquer, also in 2016, I think.
Mm-hmm. The first thing I put out independently was the Inner Bloom remix.
Okay.
And then the singles and the EP of Divide and Conquer, and then the next thing was the album.
And did you always have an album in mind? Was that, you know, we were talking about you had a plan in place, you knew what you wanted to do?
It was really when I did the Divide and Conquer EP and I did songs like Adieu and songs like Severance that I was like, oh wow, when you do a larger body of work, you don't have to make something that's going to like sort of tick off all these boxes.
Right.
You can just do whatever you want to do. You can just do it. And it's crazy because Adieu I made kind of the day that the EP was due. And it was just like this sort of offcut from Montreal. And I was like, oh, this thing's kind of vibey. I like it. And then it ended up as the most streamed thing of the entire EP. It was this thing that I made in one day that was an offcut. That was just kind of this nice little sort of sidechain floaty sort of thing.
Yeah. The way you're operating now, I mean, this whole conversation we've been talking, you've optimized your efficiency. When you became a solo act, you had these ideas you wanted to execute on, and it really seems like you're just going full throttle right now. Do you ever feel any pressure to keep that going? Like, I'm curious about where that comes from, that drive.
The drive probably comes from just dealing with a lot of bullshit and knowing how good it is when you don't have that.
Yeah.
And just being excited by amazing people around you, amazing things in life. Like I mean, Not All the Beautiful Things was so much about appreciating everything everywhere, every day. Like just walking outside and being like, wow, look at this. Look where we are. Look at what's happening. Look at these people who are here around us, you know?
Yeah.
And I found once I started looking at everything like that, you don't even have to like try and reach for some goal or some like, I'm going to play this festival and I'm going to be the headliner. It's just like, the things that are meant to happen will just happen if you actually pay attention to everything around you every day.
That's interesting. And was there a time before that you were feeling a little like just beat down by whatever was going on in your life? Like, has this been a way for you to kind of deal with things?
I mean, the horse itself, the whole idea of the horse that I have on the stage and on the album and everything is that when I was going through some rough bullshit, whatever, I would imagine myself riding on this horse up a mountain, wearing a Viking hat, kind of just screaming, throwing lightning bolts at everyone in my way. Kind of like Lieutenant Dan on the mast of the Bubba Shrimp.
Right. That's amazing.
Yeah. So, that is the easiest way to power through things. And I think a lot of my drive comes from just putting myself back in that moment for a second. I'm like, all right, let's go get it. Let's go do something exciting.
Yeah, you can now that you're past it, you can kind of tap into those feelings, use it as fuel. That's a good way to do it, man. For me, like getting on stage and playing music is 100% therapy for sure.
Yeah.
Is writing music the same way for you?
Yeah. I find writing music is therapy for me, for sure. It's like if you go through something or you're sad about something, I kind of get excited because I'm like, I bet there's a really good song coming out of this, you know? And it's so good because the second I feel sad or I'm down about something, I'm suddenly excited and then I don't feel sad and down.
That's so funny.
And then I go back and just sort of touch on that moment. And it's like I got like these tongs and I'm just grabbing little pieces of sadness and then putting it in the petri dish and letting it grow just in isolation to create something. And then like, okay, cool, that emotion's gone away again. I got a handle on that.
You got to be careful, man. I feel like with that, you'd almost start seeking out some trouble.
I've had enough trouble in my life.
Fair enough.
I'm done with the trouble. I'm good with the. You know what I realize is like there's definitely those people that just love the drama and they use it for fuel. They use it for fuel and self-fulfillment in artistry and whatever it might be. But it's so taxing, man.
It is.
And you, like
we all know those people.
I don't need to go looking for it. I don't need it in my life. I see it enough in the world. I see it enough unfortunately in my friends, you know, imposed on them or whether they're doing it themselves. But I don't have to go through anything else. I've been through enough. I've seen a lot of things. I've been through a lot of things that I can tap into whenever I need to.
Well, and it seems like you came out the other side pretty positive about everything, man. The tone overall, this whole conversation has been pretty inspired, I feel like.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. That's what I hope to do.
Well, where do you see this? Where do you see yourself, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Do you want to continue just building and building, or do you have kind of an even larger long-term goal for this?
I actually try and not have any goals.
Yeah.
Because if you set a goal, like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go finish an album, I'm going to go finish an album. But if I'm like, I want to be at this status,
right?
I don't believe in that because you're kind of setting yourself a limit as much as you're setting yourself a target.
Right.
It really goes back to this thing. I'm just like, every single day there's things that happen. There's lessons, like something shitty happens to you at the coffee store. You get like bummed out about something that some dude pushed in front of you or someone said something, and there's always this little lesson you can take away from it. And then if you apply that there's this situation that's about to come up in your life where if you paid attention to that and you apply that to that situation, you're going to come out differently than you would have if you didn't pay attention. And you're going to change your path slightly.
Yeah.
And every time you do those things, you're changing your path in a positive direction. And that's going to take you where you need to go. You don't know where you're going to go. I was an accountant for 5 years while I was doing music on the side. And then I ended up quitting my job, going overseas to South America and coming back and just saying, I think I can do music. I'm just never going to get a real job again and do that. And like,
just caught that vibe.
It was just all these little things that happened that made me push in that direction. And I would have totally just lived my life with a regular job, probably got married, bought a house and thought it was totally fine and not known everything that things could have been.
Right.
If I'd said by the age of 30, I want to have a house, I want to have a wife and blah, 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 I probably would have gone and done that.
Sure.
And I wouldn't have paid attention to what I was actually meant to do.
So it's leaving it open-ended, being in the moment. Well, that's I think, a pretty good way to end it, man.
Right.
Is there anything else you want to get out there? Anything we haven't covered?
I would really, really, really like to thank anyone listening that has bought the album, that has shared it with anyone, because I've been absolutely overwhelmed with how well it's been received. Getting something like the #1 dance album in America is like I never even thought that was going to happen in my life. I didn't think it was going to happen with this album. This was just an art project for me. I took half the singles off this thing because I didn't think they fitted the vibe and the narrative, and everyone was really mad at me. But like to see people embrace it like this is just, I'm almost like tearing up now about it. And just seeing, doing these shows, these somewhat live shows is what we're calling it, the What's So Not Somewhat live show, with Trev and playing drums again for the first time, and just the warmth and energy in the room, people singing the songs that have only been out for a month. It's absolutely crazy. So thank you, every single person that's been diving into this with me.
We usually end just by asking a very simple question. You don't have to think about it too hard. Just a moment in your life when music really changed your brain or really affected you in a deep way. Could be something from yesterday, could be something from when you were a kid. Just the first thing that pops into your head.
You know what? There's this one situation. There was this girl, right? We spent the night together. And then the next day, she was like, you should come around to my house. And in my head, in my sort of old mechanical, logistical, logical brain, I was like, no, I can't go to your house. I have to make music today because I got to get better at producing. And I ended up ignoring that. I ended up going to her house and we listened to music all day. And she showed me all this cool stuff I'd never heard. She introduced me like Frank Ocean and all this other stuff. And the next day I woke up at my house and I wrote my first original song.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, to create something, you don't just work hard at it. You need to go and put yourself in a certain frame of mind. You need to absorb things that are interesting and things that you haven't heard before and be excited by them. And then it's just going to happen. Don't do it. It's just going to happen.
Right.
And that's kind of goes back to this same concept.
Yeah, back in the moment. I like that, man. That's a perfect way to end it. Well, Chris, thank you so much, man. This has been awesome.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. It's been really fun.
All right. Peace. All right, that's the show. I want to thank What's So Not for sitting down with me. That was a crazy conversation. I left feeling really inspired, really entertained, just a fascinating guy. Everybody out there listening, thank you. I hope you enjoyed the 50th episode of Back to Back. Still so weird and awesome to say that. We got so much more coming up for you guys. My name is Willy Joy. You can always reach out to me at Willy Joy or at back-to-back-pod on all social media, or back-to-back-pod@gmail.com is the email address. I hope you guys have a great week. Have a great weekend. I'll talk to you next Tuesday for Back to Back. Peace.